The world's largest Navy is going green. The United States Navy and MIT's Sloan School of Management have teamed up in an effort to wean the Navy off petroleum. The hope is that by 2020, half of the Navy's energy consumption will come from alternative sources like biofuels. And joining me now is Lieutenant Damian Bleasy of the U.S. Navy, who is working on the project, and the MIT Program Director, Jonathan Layrick. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Well, as it stands right now, as I understand it, the military, the United States military, or the Navy, with 286 ships, 3,700 airplanes, they're one of the largest consumptions of petroleum in the world, right?
Yes. So the Department of Defense is the largest single consumer of petroleum in the world. And if looking at the United States as a whole, the government is about 2% of the whole United States, and the military is about 98% of the government. So it may not look like it's a large part, but we are the single largest petroleum user.
So, but this isn't all about just saving petroleum and not being dependent on foreign oil. It's also about climate change, right?
Yes, but primarily for us on the energy front, it's combat capability and adding capability to the warfighter. So it's not just about alternative energy. It's about energy efficiency, culture change, trying to make us a lighter, more sustainable, and lethal fighting force. So
you're working together, you're figuring out a way that you don't have to replace all these engines and all these ships and aircraft and everything else, and you're figuring out what kind of biofuels you can actually grow manageably without wasting water and too much acreage. What kinds of things have you come up with?
Well, initially we've done some studies with MIT, as exterior from my role as a student there, but we've had some student-led teams out of MIT looking at some of what we see as the future challenges with alternative fuels and with biofuels in particular. We had a team this past fall look at commercialization of biofuels between now and 2020. And to address your question, you mentioned some of the critical inputs. One of the things that the Navy is looking at for our alternative fuels and our biofuels is that they need to be sustainable. They can't be coming from a food crop. We don't want to remove food from someone's plate or a farmer to stop growing food to create fuel for the Navy. We don't want it to use a lot of water, a lot of fertilizers, a lot of other inputs, or a lot of land use. So we want it to be sustainable. Also to have a smaller greenhouse gas footprint than that of petroleum, which would be in compliance with ESA 526, which is an EPA mandate. So these are all the things that we look at for the biofuels, and then for the actual feedstock itself, we're somewhat agnostic, as long as it falls within that category, as long as it meets.
Well, do you have
those
something
wickets.
you've actually focused on? Like, isn't it some kind of an algae or something?
Yeah, so to date, we've tested and certified two alternative fuels, two biofuels. One was derived via algae, and one was derived from camelina. And the camelina biofuel is actually one that was used this past Labor Day. The Blue Angels flew on it as an ultimate confidence test.
Oh, so they tested already. Wow.
Yes.
All right, so Sloan's
take on this is that this is not just a science issue. And Damian and I are agreeing on this. This is not a science issue. This is a business issue. So as an organization and as a consumer, the United States Navy, together with MIT, is trying to figure out what's the future of the engines, the use, the consumption, the sustainability, which is why we made sustainability a core of the MIT Executive MBA program, which is what Damian is part of, and why MIT focuses on these lab courses, these project courses, such as the ones that Damian worked with on the students, to take the theory from the classroom, from science, and apply it directly into making the Navy more sustainable, more effective in defending the country, and in fact leading what will ultimately be consumer use of biofuels.
Now, we're getting back to this whole thing about climate change and all that. That's all part of this. Maybe you can address that the United States sees climate change as a security threat, I mean, essentially, because what can happen in third world countries.
Right. So climate change is an issue for every individual, but also as a national issue. And MIT, and particularly MIT Sloan School of Management, has been at the forefront, particularly with my colleague, Professor John Sturman, of helping the nations and the national governments actually do the calculations of what climate change really means for the economies and for sustainability. So the effort that the U.S. Navy and the MIT working together, as they've been working together for over 70 years now, this most recent effort is to take the science beyond science and into what will be the future of the Navy and the next generation.
Right. Want to elaborate on that a little?
So the military does recognize the security and national security implications.
Explain what that is. You know, what happens?
When you start having global climate change, it can cause regional instabilities, and primarily from this energy standpoint, which is what I work in. Those regional instabilities then correspond to interruptions of supply. So you can have energy price shocks, which we've seen even this past year in the Middle East, or interruptions of supply when a lot of our resources are coming from one area. So primarily, and I primarily work in the energy aspect of this as opposed to the climate aspect, but in looking at how climate change can affect regional instabilities, it can dramatically impact energy and energy prices and
How
supply.
did this marriage between the Navy and MIT come about?
Well, it goes back to the development of radar, and even before that. So this particular marriage of MIT and Navy is decades old, and we're very proud of it. This particular marriage most recently came out of this inspiration, let's put it that way, of the Navy to work closely with student teams on the management side as well as the science and engineering side, so that we can do more than speculate, do more than develop technology, but actually translate that for the use of policymakers and senior leaders in the Navy and beyond.
And I think one of the major aspects that brought us to MIT was to have some of these, what we are envisioning as potential future challenges, analyzed with an exterior view, and then also from an institution that has such a renowned reputation of rigor and academic excellence.
All right, so now you're hoping to roll out 50% of your fleet by 2016 to have it capable of operating on these biofuels, correct?
Well, we're test and certifying our fleet right now. So we are certifying we're actually certifying the fuel and not the platform. So we're not changing the actual engines themselves. We're just engineering the fuel. But our goals are by 2012, next year, we'll have a demo. In 2016, we'll have a strike group. But we're not actually going to be rolling our fleet on 50% biofuel annually until 2020. So 2020 is our goal of 50% biofuel.
Will these ships and planes be able to go as fast? Yeah?
Yes, absolutely.
Faster?
They will be. So the fuel is chemically identical. So the chemistry with the biofuels compared to petroleum is the biofuels have a little bit less energy density, but by mixing it with petroleum and then some other additives that have been researched, that comes back out. And the Green Hornet was the first supersonic test flight of a aircraft on biofuel last year, and that actually got up to Mach 1.7, so that's pretty fast.
You just mentioned something, camelina. What is that?
Camelina is one of the feedstocks that the Navy has tested to create biofuels. It's a mustard seed. I believe it's native to Montana, and that's what we've tested most of our aviation platforms on, a camelina-based biofuel. And we've also tested algae-based biofuel. We sailed a ship on biofuel last summer called the RCBX.
It all sounds pretty exciting.
Well, at the MIT Executive MBA program, which is what Damien is part of, Damien's not the only one thinking about biofuels. We have students who run biofuel companies. There's ones that start others. So biofuels are clearly the future of energy, which is a big deal for MIT and for future executives. So it is exciting.
All right, great. Thanks so much for coming, Damien Blasey, Jonathan Lyric.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, that is it for Greater Boston. A reminder to tune into my radio show at noon on 89.7 WGBH. Tomorrow, it's our Week in Review. Then tomorrow on Beat the Press, a literal transcription of an Obama speech lands the AP in some hot water. That and more tomorrow at 7. And on a final note, if you've been following the collapse of the Red Sox with us, you know that our friend Bob Lobel lent us his infamous panic button. Last night, the Red Sox lost to the Baltimore Orioles. At the same time, the Tampa Bay Rays were staging an amazing comeback against the Yankees. The Red Sox season is over. The collapse is complete. Well, Bob, take it away.
So, Bob, where do you want this thing?
Well, Ronnie, obviously we're going to need it again sometime, so why don't you just throw it in the back of the car and I'll keep it, and call me when you need it, okay? Probably about this time next year.
See you next year.
See you next year.
Take care.
Yep.
Right,
so
Bob.
good,
Drive
so
carefully.
good,
We
so
need it for
good.
next year.
Sweet Caroline. Ho, ho, ho.